for this week's memo to Trump. I want to talk about an educational failure. And at least this one, Mr. President, you can't blame Betsy DeVos. No, this is entirely on you and your absurd executive orders banning racial sensitivity training for all government agencies and contractors. You recently took to Twitter to spout your own uninformed take on the order your handlers no doubt prepared for you to sign, claiming that you're banning the indoctrination of, quote, government employees with divisive and harmful sex and race-based ideologies, end of quote. That statement reveals your complete ignorance about what these trainings are for, because systemic racism and sexism ensures that American adults have already been indoctrinated with harmful sex and race-related ideologies, those of white supremacy and patriarchy. And in your second tweet, you imply that anyone who doesn't completely embrace your version of America and your own embrace, or at least tolerance, of white supremacy somehow doesn't love the country. The unfortunate implication is clear. You claim that being anti-racist is anti-American, which means you believe that racism is inherently American. That certainly explains your desperation to downplay the wave of violence being committed on our streets by white supremacists, because you know that white supremacists make up an important part of your base, which is probably why, instead of denouncing them at Tuesday's debates, you said this.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what, somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing.
Far from condemning white nationalist groups, you instructed these right-wing extremists to, quote, stand by, all but directing them to escalate their violence. This despite your own head of the Department of Homeland Security telling Congress that white supremacists are the most persistent extremist threat to this country. And they heard you loud and clear, Mr. President. This white supremacist hate group now has your very own words incorporated into its logo. Fitting, since your complete disinterest in fighting the scourge of coronavirus has resulted in the disproportionate suffering and death of Black Americans, a national shame. Maybe now that you've tested positive yourself, you'll find an ounce of compassion for the hundreds of thousands of Americans suffering because of your malign incompetence. But I wouldn't hold my breath. Still, despite your best efforts to advance white supremacy, all is not lost. The United States can defeat its shameful addiction to racism, sexism, and other forms of oppression. After all, in comparison to many other countries around the world, the U.S. is still in its adolescence. The grand experiment in democracy has been chugging along for just under 250 years. And you, Mr. President, cannot be allowed to stunt its growth. We, the people, will never stop fighting to realize the full potential enshrined in the Constitution that I am quite certain you still have not read. So here's a foundational line from another document you have surely neglected to read, the Declaration of Independence. Quote, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. I know understanding consent isn't really your strong suit, but come November 3rd, even you won't be able to ignore the chorus of millions of Americans at the ballot box, rejecting your unpatriotic views that racism and sexism are the American way, and your shameful implication that wanting the country to be better means we do not love it as we should. As always, Mr. President, your lazy approach to learning betrays you. The founders encouraged us to go forth and make a more perfect union. And with you out of office, we'll be one step closer. Until then, Mr. President, you have my number. Once you're done with your isolation, give me a call, and I will come myself to teach you and your staff that racial sensitivity class free of charge. Be right back.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.